So black, I just decided to continue development by castling. He continues this slow knight maneuver with knight f1, and then I seized the opportunity just to play immediately knight d4. I probably only thought for about 30 seconds here because it seems like white's reply is forced. If he ignores this threat and makes some other move, then he's going to be subject to some pressure after the bishop comes to g4. So he kind of has to take. So let's see this. So the knight took on d4, and I recaptured with bishop takes d4. And now the bishop is on a nice central square controlling a lot of squares. It has a lot of freedom, and black has a comfortable edge, I think, at this stage. So now, because of this, white sees that there's some potential pressure on this diagonal that he has to deal with, and also this f pawn is pinned currently. So he plays h3 as a preventative measure, and perhaps that's another indication that rook e2 was a slight inaccuracy. So I followed up. Now that I've got this bishop has been liberated, I developed to f5. With hindsight, maybe perhaps the rook on e6 would have been more accurate. It really controls more squares from this vantage point, and it also targets this pawn and kind of temporarily, at least, ties the rook to the defense of that pawn. So that might have been a little bit of an inaccuracy. So instead I played bishop f5. He plays rook b1 now, just to free the bishop from defense of the b2 pawn, and I play queen h4. So this is quite a bold move, and this is some potential pitfalls because now the knight can't come to the square because of the pin on f2. So there's a few things to watch out for there. So queen h4, he plays bishop e3, and I just played the move c5 now, because I figured that if he does decide to exchange on d4, I can simply recapture with c takes d, and I've undone those doubled pawns, which could be slightly difficult to deal with if we do get into an endgame. So my opponent, in response to c5, did not take on d4. So what did he do? He plays queen d2, and queen d2 is just, I think that the motive is just to prepare to double the rooks, and he's also eyeing this g5 square to harass the queen. So in order to prevent that, I just played h6. He now plays knight h2, preparing for knight to f3, and I didn't really want to be harassed, so I played queen f6 here, and I had a little idea in mind here, and that is that if he later if he later brings his knight to this square, we could get into an overloading situation where the g-pawn is defending both the h-pawn and the knight, and there would be a potential tactic with bishop takes h3, and actually that comes to fruition later, which we'll see. So let's just go back to the mainline variation. So he played, so after queen f6, he finally took on d4. I recaptured, undoubling those pawns, and which is also nice because it prevents white from later using this e3 square, and also probably points to that earlier inaccuracy of playing d3 instead of d4. So he played queen b4, targeting this weak square on b2, But I simply just responded with b6, which is now covered by both the c7 pawn and the queen on f6. He brings his knight to f3, and the potential is now here for a tactic if he doesn't play accurately here. So I played c5, and he played queen to d7, and the tactic that we discussed earlier has really sort of come to fruition now, because we have bishop takes h3, and if g takes h3, then queen takes f3, and white's kingside pawns are kind of smashed open. So after that, he just kind of ignored that temporarily and doubled his rooks. So he's potentially creating an entry point for his rooks and trying to get some counterplay on this e2 square. But will he have time to do that? I played the move here, queen g6. It's a very kind of primitive move, simply threatening checkmate on the g2 square. When I looked back over the game, I found a better continuation, which would have been just to simply play bishop g4, and then there's some very uncomfortable pressure here for white. So that's one line I looked at would be something like this: rook e7, bishop takes f3, g takes f3, and queen takes f3, and black has a solid winning advantage. But I did play queen g6 instead, and after g3 I swung my queen over the queen side and on the light squares to exert some uncomfortable pressure along this long diagonal. Now the knight is pinned. Of course, if the knight moves now, it would be mate on g2, so white has to be cautious of that. So here white played rook f4, and then I played f5, and I think the best continuation here would have been for the white rook to come to the h4 square like this, and we would have seen something like queen taking f3 and the rook taking on h3, and again black would have a big edge in this position. But what he did do is he played rook e6, which actually loses on the spot because he's playing this rook to e6 to hit the queen, but he's overlooked the simple capture of queen takes f3, after which it's going to be mate in two no matter what. So we had queen takes f3. Now that pull meant my opponent reached out with his hand and resigned. So all in all, it was an interesting battle. I think there was some inaccuracies on both sides, but I think black's play was a bit more direct, and he had more active pieces, and that was enough to settle the game in this case. So thank you very much for watching. Post any comments on YouTube, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.